have welcome Ruben Sanchez from Workday. Everyone, yeah. Um, so with regards to the Workday changes, we're going to be talking about specific changes and tips and tricks and/or refreshers that go over recruitment, compensation, benefits, and leave. We're going to start the session. Thank you. We're going to start the session by going over the employee types. That's one of the topics of conversation that was largely debated between the 5 employee types under the collective agreement. And then we'll go over employee types that are not part of the collective agreement. And we'll follow this by going over, again, the Workday changes. And if you have any immediate questions, feel free to jump in or raise your hand and ask, and we'll answer that. Around the room, we have a few key resources from different aspects of the HR and Workday team. We have HR generalists in the room, and then LR specialist, as well as Workday. And then among yourselves, you have managers and budget keepers or budget officers who touch on different aspects of what we're going to be talking about. So it's good to have that mix and ask questions which others will benefit from. And one last thing, the session is being recorded. And then after the session is done, you'll receive a link with the recording. It could be this recording, it could be another recording, as well as the PowerPoint deck, and then frequently asked questions. You'll receive a link where you just log in and you get access to those items. So we'll get started, and we're going to start with the part-time support staff employee types. And then after that, we'll be going over the Workday update, and then the refreshers of recruiting, benefits and leave, compensation, and then a Q&A period at the end. The Phase 3 discussions, or the Phase 3 changes that we're going to be going over, they're known as Phase 3 changes. So with Workday, it's a project where it went live, and then there were a few changes that needed to be done. One of these changes is known as Phase 3, so the changes will be talked about. You might hear them referred to as Phase 3. And that went live on October 7th. So we had 2 sessions before that date, and we talked about the changes. That way you could prepare yourself. And then now moving forward, we have 2 more sessions, so this one and 1 more session to go over the changes. So we'll start with the employee types and descriptions. So the part-time support staff collective agreement, which did go live or got ratified on February 21st. It's known as a PTSSCA. So that's the abbreviation, which you'll commonly hear it. The CA, or the collective agreement, contains the terms and conditions of employment. So it contains the terms of employment, it contains the conditions of employment. I see a lot of new faces in the room. So before, we used to have just terms and conditions when we have new hires at the college. Now we don't have T's and C's or terms and conditions in a contract. The actual collective agreement, which can be found online, is the terms and conditions of employment. So no more contracts, just offer letters. The offer letter would say, welcome to the college, this is your position type, and this is your terms and conditions, and then we'd link the collective agreement. Hello, welcome. This session is the part-time support staff collective agreement and Workday session. Pembroke, okay. So with the collective agreement, there are 5 distinct employee types, which we'll go over one by one. And again, if you're looking for the collective agreement, there are no hard copy booklets, so you'll have to go online, and then if you'd like to print it, you can print it at the bookstore, or you can keep a soft copy on your computer. It's under HR, then you click on employee relations, then click on collective agreements, and then you'll get there. So there are 5 employee types to the part-time support staff collective agreement. The first one is regular part-time, casual, temporary, student, and project of non-recurring kind. I'll go over the 5 definitions and then give examples for each. In terms of common characteristics or common properties for all 5 of them, if you look at the right side, the key highlights, all 5 employee types pay union dues, whether you work 1 day a week or 1 day of the year or every week of the year, you pay union dues. All employee types are all employee types have access to overtime if they work over 40 hours a week. So once you pass 40 hours a week, you get overtime triggered and you get time and a half. Holidays, also all employee types have access to holiday provisions, and I noted the article numbers next to each of these highlights, so that if you want more information, before reaching out to your generalist, you can look at the collective agreement and have a read there. And then if you have any questions on interpreting it or if anything's unclear, feel free to reach out to one of us, depending on what subject matter it is. Also, vacation pay with the part-time support staff employees, they don't get vacation days as days in terms of, let me rephrase that. Part-time support staff employees do get vacation days, but it's unpaid. However, in lieu of paid vacation days, they get a 6% lump sum every 2 weeks to the income that they earn. And then also access to a few types of leaves. So you have bereavement leave. Depending on who you're bereaving, you get a specific number of days unpaid. And then, paid. Paid bereavement leave. Pregnancy leave also, it's as per ESA. And then there's the grievance procedure. So since you're paying union dues, these employees are paying union dues, you also have access to grievance procedures or grievance steps. So if there's an issue with any of these employees and they feel that their rights are perhaps not being abided by, then they can file grievances. They have different things that they can grieve. However, they all have access to the grievance procedure. Also, breaks. There's an article on breaks, which Courtney will discuss in a bit, and I'll get offer letters. So any type of employee coming to the college to work will get some sort of document or a letter through Workday saying, welcome to the college, and these are the hours you're working, or this is what your employment would look like. Any questions on these 5 types so far? We'll start with RPTs. So this is the most common employee type potentially at the college. So regular part-times. You'll hear RPTs a lot across the college. That's regular part-time. And regular part-time employees are employed in a continuous position of indefinite extent with regularly scheduled hours on a weekly basis. So the key characteristic of RPTs are that they are indefinite, these positions, and these individuals in these positions are indefinite in nature, and they're in a continuous, so it's a position that is continuous. And they have regularly scheduled hours on a weekly basis. So you have to have hours every single week to be considered an RPT. Some RPTs can occupy less than 12-month positions. So if you're familiar with the full-time collective agreement, you have positions that are 9 months of the year, full-time support staff, 10 months or 11 months, or 12 months. With the RPTs, you can have positions that are 8 months of the year every year, 9 month, 10 month, 11 or 12. So the idea here is that it's accommodating the summer or seasonal layoff, and the most common one is an employee hired in September. They work all the way up to August. Well, and they're off for the summer. Sorry, September all the way to May. And they're off for 4 months, and then they come back. So they're temporarily laid off. That position is held for them. While they're on layoff, they come back to that position. So very similar to the full-time support staff. And with these RPTs, they can work a maximum of 24 hours a week. When there is a vacant RPT position, similar to the full-time support staff, you have to take that vacant RPT position and post it. So it must be posted for all applicants or all potential applicants who are interested to apply to get that position. And with those RPT postings, the priority is for RPT applicants. Again, similar to the full-time. And I'll keep referring to the full-time where we can tie a connection because that's what's been most familiar for the past many years. So you have post an RPT position, you look at your RPT applicants, and then you look at everyone else. Now, with regards to access and benefits of the collective agreement, RPTs have access to shift premium. And Courtney will talk about the details of that. But similar to full-time, they have access to shift premium. They have access to citizenship leave and jury/witness duty. Union leave as well. They can take union leave for union business, whether it's a meeting or a conference. There's provisions on that. Also developmental leave or PD leave, which can be accommodated by the manager with pay, without pay, or a mix of both for legitimate PD. And then they can be on-call or callback, similar to full-time. If you have a position that you need on-call, there's specific premiums that they get for that, or for callback. Also, all RPTs have access to probation, to be on probation and have seniority. So similar to full-time, where you have a full-time support staff, they work for 6 months, and then they pass probation. With part-time support staff, specifically regular part-time or RPTs, they have probation of 936 hours. Once they pass 936 hours of working in an RPT capacity, they then pass probation, and then they get on the seniority list. And the only way to get on the seniority list is if you pass probation. Okay. So we'll talk about a few examples. For RPTs, the most common example that we use as a benchmark are food service clerks or food service workers working 24 hours a week from Monday to Friday every single week. So the 24 hours a week from Monday to Friday could be split equally, or could be split with some more heaviness on the beginning of the week, but it's 24 hours a week, Monday to Friday every week. Or you can have a CSR in the registrar's office working 10 hours a week, 9 months every year. So the idea there is during the summer, there isn't much work, so for 2 months they're laid off. 2 months are over, they come back to their regular position. And then the last case here is ITS representatives working 5 hours every week, but sometimes they work 10 hours, and some rare weeks they only work 3 hours. So in this case, an RPT position is posted, and they're posted at 5 hours a week. However, you know that sometimes you have peaks in workload because students are there, so you increase their hours from 5 hours to 10 hours. So you give this individual a 2 weeks heads up or 2 weeks notice, saying, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to need you to work 10 hours a week. So then they work 10 hours. And you let them know that this increase to 10 hours is only for that 1 week, with the understanding that after that, it's going to go back to their regular hours per week of 5. And then there are some weeks where you don't need them 5 hours. You give them 2 weeks heads up and say, hey, in a few weeks' time, we only need you to work 3 hours for that 1 week. So you give them 2 weeks' notice, and they are working 3 hours for that week. The idea here is that they have regularly scheduled hours every week. Just sometimes there's a change in hours where we follow the provision which says you need to give 2 weeks' notice at least for RPT positions. Yes?
If their schedule is changing, do you have to notify the union, or is like an email to the employee sufficient enough?
Good question. So you just have to notify the employee, and you don't need to notify the union if a schedule is changing. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So for temporary employees, that's the second type of employees. They're in 2 different ways. It could be either you employ them to replace an RPT, so similar to an Appendix D in a full-time, you have an RPT who went on sick leave, or an RPT who is on a development leave or vacation. You want to backfill them. When you want to backfill an RPT, you use a temporary classification or employee type. The other way you can use a temporary is if you want to have a position for up to 9 months or 9 consecutive months. So you know that there's a project that you need someone on a part-time basis, for example. You need someone for 3 months or 5 months for 24 hours a week to finish this project. You can hire a temporary as well. So there's 2 ways to use it. Temporary is not just for backfilling, but it's also for when you want to hire someone for up to a period of 9 months, up to 24 hours. With all temporary positions, whether it's the first or the second type of temporary position, they have an end date. And you can't have them for more than 9 months, 9 consecutive months, if it's the second type. If someone is on sick leave for a year, there is no limitation that you can't replace them for the full year. So the 9-month limit only applies when you're employing a temporary for a project of some sort. And again, there is a maximum of 24 hours per week for temporaries, and they have access to shift premium. When you have a temporary position that should say temporary, not RPT. So when you have a temporary position that you want to vacate, there are two ways you can do that. Either you let that contract, which has an end date, come to an end naturally, where the person works till the end date, or if you need to end it prior, then you would follow ESA, where you would release or terminate the employee based on employment standards, where you give them 1 week's notice for a workload of up to 1 year. So ideally, you'd give them more than 1 week's notice. So if you can give them 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the greater time you can give them as a heads up that this contract is no longer needed. The more notice you can give, the better. But if you give them at least 1 week, you're meeting ESA. The reason you'd want to give more is to maintain engagement with the employee themselves and the group as a whole. So we're going to look at employee examples for temporary. So again, as I noted, if you have an RPT who's on leave and you need to replace them, you replace them with a temporary employee. The second example is if you have a short-term increase in workload, for example, a 2-month peak in work, then you consider it temporary. And you'd be able to identify this as a temporary because it's short-term increase and you know it's not going to happen again during that 12-month period. And the third example is if there's the last one is not an example, but a scenario where you have a short-term increase of work that is 8 months or more, and if this short-term increase repeats year after year, then you roll it over to an RPT position because you have 8 months worth of work or 9 or 10 months worth of work year over year. You'd make that an RPT because that makes sense because it's regular part-time work. Yes?
If someone's in a temporary job, a temporary position, and they're there for 9 months, and you want to, can they automatically be converted to an RPT without posting it if you wanted to change that? No?
If you know what's going to happen, then no, you need to post it. If you're doing it year over year and you miss that it's an RPT, just plan ahead. So no, if you know that you're going to need this position and you did it as a temporary to maybe try it if you need it, then you know that you have an RPT coming up, so posting is the best way. Okay. This is to the second example, which was given regarding, if you have a short-term increase in workload. So if you have a 2-month increase in workload, and then you have next year, you anticipate having the same increase in workload, try to incorporate that increase into your RPT work pool. So one of the intents of temporary is that it accommodates temporary increases in workload. Now, if your workload increases and you know it's going to increase year over year, take your RPT positions and plan with their schedules and the amount of RPTs you have to have them, the RPTs, take over this increase in workload rather than hiring temporary for 2 months and then releasing them every single year. It makes more sense to kind of incorporate it with more stable employee groups, and that's the RPT. They already have the training, so that's one benefit is the cost of training and just engagement where you have additional hours, you're giving it to your current work pool. So strategic workforce planning of your full-time and part-time support staff is required to ensure that operations run efficiently while meeting the obligations of the collective agreement. Any questions on that? Okay. The third type of employee is casual. So those are employees who work on a call-in basis and or do not have regularly scheduled hours per week. Casual employees also have an end date. They also work a maximum of 24 hours per week and also released or terminated as per ESA. So casual, as the name suggests, it's a casual employee for casual work. And the most common example that we have is in the food services department. You have banquet staff for an event that gets booked at the college and you need someone to cater those events. So you could have a roster of employees just for that one night or that one day. Say you go through your casual list and say, hey, can you work on the Saturday from 8 to 12? We just want you for the 4 hours. If they say no, you go to the next. If they decline an assignment, that doesn't mean anything long-term. You can just keep them on the roster. There's no obligation to give it to anyone specific. Part of that casual list, it's a casual pool. And that's how you fill those types of work. Student employees are the fourth employee type, and those are positions or employee types that are students, specifically, who occupy positions that are only available to current students of the college. So keywords here, it's a position that you are giving specifically to a student. This position can only be filled by a student of the college. So again, it's only for active or current Algonquin College students, has an end date, maximum of 24 hours per week, and also released as per ESA. So there are multiple reasons why you'd have a position that you'd only offer to students. It could be their unique experience in a class, or because you want to ensure that the students get real-life experience in a specific task or field. There's some confusion at times, you know, a manager would say, I have a student position, then later on it's, well, I can't fill it with a student, I'll just make it a temporary. So when you have that sort of thought process, then it's no longer a student position because you were able to fill it with a non-student. So you'd have to ask yourself, if you can't fill this position with a student, what are you going to do? If you say, I'm just going to fill it with a non-student, so someone who's not a current Algonquin College student, then don't designate this position as a student position or a student employee position. You can designate as a temporary or as an RPT or as a casual, but not as a student. If your response to that question is, I just leave it unfilled, the whole purpose of me having this role is to enrich the student's work experience, then you may designate this as a student position because you're filling that gap. So common examples of when you'd use a student, perhaps as a tutor. Tutors, there's a criteria of having experience in a specific class, and the only people who would have experience in a specific class are the students who went to that class. So you need to make sure that they're employed the term after as students. So you can designate them as the tutors as students. Yes.
Are there any number of hours or classes a student has to take at Algonquin per week to be qualified as a student employee?
No. You don't need to have a specific number of classes or hours to be designated as a student. Okay. No. So co-op students, thank you, I'll touch on that. Co-op students are not part of the collective agreement. Co-op students are not covered by any collective agreement, so they're their own independent category. These students are covered as CSEP or ISEP. The other type of employees that are students are Appendix Gs. They're covered by another collective agreement, which is the full-time support staff collective agreement. So you essentially have three different buckets of employees that could be students. You have students as per the part-time support staff collective agreement. You have students as per the full-time support staff collective agreement, and just co-op students that are not part of either.
Ralph, do you have to post for student employees if they're IEP or CSEP?
You don't need to post for student positions if they're IEP or CSEP as per the collective agreement. We do have HL 7, which says you need to post if it's over a period of 4 months. However, I don't think this applies to this case, but I will pass it off to Amanda, who's nodding her head.
No, you don't have to.
Okay. The other one are greeters or bookstore clerks. So some managers have said, for example, we want greeters in the registrar's office or bookstore clerks in the bookstore to be students because they relate more to students, and they also give the students experience in work, which some students have no experience in work, whether they're international or coming to college right out of high school, they might not have work experience. So this is a good opportunity to provide to the students to have work experience. And yes, so peer-to-peer experience. And again, the idea here is that if you don't fill this greeter position or bookstore clerk position, you just leave it empty. You don't, the student positions that you have aren't affecting the RPT or the temporary positions that you also have on your workforce. So if you say hire lots of students, it shouldn't affect how many temporary or how many RPTs you have from the other end. So the last piece of position here is projects of a non-recurring kind. That's the fifth one, and this is a type of position that has been around since the full-time collective agreement as well. It was in one of the appendices where you have a project of non-recurring kind. So this specific employee type has to have 35, 36 and a quarter, 37 and a half, or 40 hours per week. So it's full-time hours with a maximum of 1 year. So it has an end date. This is when you have a project that is not going to recur again. So it could be 6 months or it could be 12 months. And they have access to shift premium. And if the project ends early or if you no longer need that specific position, then they're also released or terminated as per ESA. And yeah, so that is PNRK. Any questions about PNRK or project of a non-recurring kind? Perfect, and this is where I pass it off to Aruna, and then again at the end we can have questions for Workday or anything else.
Thanks, Ralph. How do I do this? Just left and right. Okay, let me figure this out here. Okay, great. Okay. Can I be heard? Yeah, okay, sorry. So let's carry on with the Workday updates for the part-time. So on the slide here, basically, before October the 7th, before the changes, we had 3 categories: the RPT, the student, and the part-time support fixed term. Now we have RPTs, regular part-times, student, temporary, casual, and PNRKs, as Ralph had gone through all the categories and classifications. So when we see this on Workday itself, so you'll notice that you'll have to request this specific position. So now you'll have a choice of the 5 categories. So it's really important to know what you're looking for. So right at the very beginning, it's best not to guess. It's best to figure out, ask the questions beforehand as to what you're actually seeking. And then when you submit a requisition, so the first one was a position. So the position is really important. So how we work with Workday is position, requisition, and then we hire. So with the position, making sure that we fill out the form correctly for the request. And then the requisition also allows you to confirm the appropriate employee type as well on Workday. And then when you're completing the hire into the requisition, and again, there's a confirmation of the employee type. So any questions about the actual Workday flow on that?
People that were already existing in the part-time category that now should fall into like the RPT category, will they be converted automatically or? Yeah.
I believe majority of them have already been converted to the RPT. There might be some stragglers that, if you notice, that we'll have to change it. But I believe that there was a conversion date in June. There was a time period that we converted a majority of from the HRIS system to the Workday system.
But if you do notice any stragglers, then let your generalist know, because those should all be converted so that they have all the appropriate union dues deductions and like all the rules apply to them. But over the past months, we have reached out to all the managers saying, here are the employees who should be classified in one of the 5, because right now they're classified as part-time support staff. And then we got a response, and we classified as per the response.
So recommendation is to kind of go to your supervisory org, go through the positions, and take a look at the positions to see if they're correctly categorized in the classification.
So just to expand on this, so in June, basically that was the first phase where we did the changeover. So anybody that Ralph would have sent to the managers, those were converted through a process in Workday. However, in phase 3, which is this one right now that we just did, again, there was some leftovers that we did convert. And obviously, right now, they should all be. However, there were some processes that were still in progress. Some employees that probably didn't get converted due to errors. So if you're still seeing them, please contact your HR generalist, because those need to be changed. If you notice any of them, basically it would say part-time support inactive. That might have an impact on timesheets, because again, new rules have been configured based on the new employee type. So if you do have those, contact them as soon as possible. Otherwise, there's a good chance that those employees might not get paid.
Any other questions regarding the Workday process? Fairly straightforward? Yep. Okay. And so one other thing about our Workday update is the breaks. So the part-time support staff are entitled to breaks. They're entitled to 30 minutes of unpaid breaks after 5 hours of work. So before there was a problem with this, that they were not properly set up. So for time entries, employees need to enter the actual time in and out, so the break actually is calculated accordingly. So you schedule the person when they start in them, like for example, 8 o'clock, and then schedule out at 4 o'clock, for example. So that way the breaks work properly. Any questions? Okay. That's it. Thank you. Next is Amanda. She'll be giving a recruiting refresher. Go slow.
Hello. Okay, so just a recruiting refresher for Workday. So essentially everything starts with the position, so ensuring that the position is created correctly is extremely important. HR creates all of the positions, both full-time and part-time. But specifically for part-time, there is a spreadsheet, the part-time position request form, that needs to be filled out by everyone if you do require a new part-time position. You may see some in your supervisory organization as well, and we'll get to that piece. So, but everything needs to be vetted through this spreadsheet. And it's extremely important to have the correct employee type, because it triggers various aspects through the Workday process. So getting the right offer letter sent to the employee, providing access to the right leaves, and orientation, ensuring that everyone that should be going to orientation is actually invited to orientation. Replacement positions. So for reporting purposes specifically, it's extremely important to be putting as much detail as possible when you're creating requisitions for replacements. So if you are creating an Appendix D or a temporary replacement as part of the new part-time collective agreement, it's very important to indicate why you need the replacement, so whether it's vacation, a medical leave, whatever the case is. And then it's also important to include the person's name of who you're replacing. We do need all that information, and it is sent to the union as well. I do want to make a note that there is a temporary category for the part-time support staff, but then there's also a temporary assignment option that you will see in Workday when creating requisitions and hiring employees. The temporary assignment is specific for full-timers covering a full-time assignment, and then the temporary replacement under the part-time collective agreement is either the temporary who has up to a 9-month contract or covering for an RPT. So there is a difference in the terminology, and it can get confusing, but just keep in mind that temporary assignments are specific to a full-timer covering a full-timer position, okay? Duplicate accounts have become a huge issue. Sometimes we don't always see the name, and so we create a second account by accident, which causes a whole other mix-up. So there's a couple of ways to see if the person already exists in Workday. So my suggestion, or our suggestion, would be just at the top of the Workday search bar, just type in the employee's name, John Smith, type it in. See if they come up. You will be able to see if they are currently active at the college. If they are terminated, you will not be able to see it. I don't believe timekeepers or budget officers have that ability. Managers, Ruben, do managers see terminated employees if they haven't worked, if they search? No, okay. So you'll be able, if they are currently active at the college, regardless if they're working in your department or not, you will see the name populate, and in that case, you'll just do an add job, okay? If not, you'll go search through for their pre-hire, and that's done through the actual requisition. So you'll go existing pre-hire, type their name in there. Anyone who has been terminated in Workday and is not currently active will show up there. If at that point you don't see anybody, then you can create a new pre-hire account. You can also, if you're really not sure, you're like, oh, I think they worked here in the past, I heard that they worked here in the past, pick up the phone, call your generalist. They can do a quick search, whether it's in Workday or HRIS, they could do that, okay? Position management, so this goes back to creating positions. So under the supervisory organization, so in this case we have Leanne Brown's talent and system reporting. If you go to the tab called staffing, unfortunately she doesn't have anything here, but you'll be able to see all vacant positions under that tab. So rather than requesting all of these positions, go to that tab, see what you have available. You'll be like, oh, I don't need to request a part-time non-teaching role. I have 3 right here. You can, through the requisition, you can change the cost center if it's not the right one. You can change a bunch of different things. So, but all of the information in terms of positions will be listed under that tab. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Start dates at the beginning of a pay period. So this is particularly important with full-time positions. So whether a full-timer is moving into another full-time position or if a part-timer is moving to a full-time position. Part-time to part-time isn't as big of a deal because they're entering their time, but with full-time, it's salary and it's automatic. So just ensure if you do have a new full-time employee, brand new, who has never worked here before, again, not a big deal if they do not start at the beginning of a pay period. However, if they are an existing employee moving from a full-time position to another full-time position, please do ensure that it is at the beginning of the pay period. If you're not sure what the beginning of the pay period is, you can go onto the HR website. We have a pay schedule there, or call someone in HR. Okay? And finally, ending or extending positions. So this is extremely important. So employees can be left active and they're not actually working, which is a huge liability, especially in terms of having ROEs generated and all that stuff. So ending positions, very easy. You just go to the employee's profile, actions, job change, and then end additional job, and you just put in the information that it asks you, what their last day of work was. Very, very straightforward. If they are being extended, it's actually done through a change job, through a data change, and then extend fixed term position. And then again, you just put in their new end date. New terms and conditions should populate, and then it should go to the employee to sign so that they know that they're still working for you. Any questions?
I don't think that our employees that my budget officer has extended, they don't get terms and conditions. They aren't getting anything extra.
If it's being done through a change job, they will generate.
Okay.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think for your area, it's for part-time academics that you guys are doing that for mainly. Is that correct? So for part-time support, it's a little bit different. So for academics, they need a new contract every 4 months for most positions. I'm going to say 99. For part-time support, if it's a fixed term and say you have an employee for 2 months and then you've decided it's a temporary position, you know, I need them for an extra month, you can definitely extend it or end it at that point. So, okay.
Yeah, part-time academic is a whole other presentation. They constantly need new contracts because they are usually 4 months at a time, so it's not just extending their current authorization or assignment that they have. It is 4 months at a time, every time they do get new terms and conditions. However, for part-time support specifically, if you do go through the change job, it will generate new terms and conditions that indicates their new end date of their contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Susan Dever, and I am one of two leave officers, and I'm just going to go through the benefits and leave refresher presentation. For most leaves, there's a time off entitlement that would be short-term. So these are the types of leaves that would be 1 day here or there, or days typically less than 5 in a row. There's not a lot of impact to the employee of taking these days, and they're done through the self-serve in most cases. And then there are other types of leaves, so I'll just go over a high-level overview of this. There are other types of leave entitlements that are used for longer-term situations, and these leaves include the maternity, parental, and extended parental leave. These leaves are legislated, and there are also other leaves with pay, seasonal layoff, and short-term disability leaves, as well as WSIB would be a different entry too for time off. So when a part-time employee takes any of these leaves, their jobs are, for the parental, maternity, and extended leave, their jobs are protected. We can't deny the time that they're requesting if it's in line with what the maximums are. And when we go through a little bit further, you'll see who can enter these leaves, whether it's employee self-serve or whether it is the manager or whether it is us, the absence partners. So going through, if you have a copy of the presentation afterwards, this will go through the different types of leaves. So these are the time off plans. It indicates whether the leave is paid or unpaid and whether it would be entered by the employee themselves. And when the employee goes into Workday and they want to enter time off, only the leaves that that person is eligible for will be accessible to them. So you'll know that each of and anything that you would select for yourself even or any employee, only the leaves that they're eligible for will show up. And if you make any errors in the number of days, if you exceed the number of days, you'll get an error message letting you know that no, you can't do that. So if there's ever comes a point where you're stumped, or if you have employees coming where they're stumped and they're not sure what to do, that's when you'll reach out to the absent partners. And this is just going through the time off plans. And then there are different leave types that are available also. And these are the types that they're not entered into the calendar, but they're entered as a leave. So there's a start date, a definitive start date, an estimated return to work date. And these are for the longer term. And these include your types of leaves such as leave with pay, your maternity parental leaves. There is, let me see here. These are entered typically by the absence partner. There's often forms associated with the leaves. But if there's any questions, again, it's the same standard that was going on before, but if there's any questions, you can just reach out to us for that. And we have vacation days for part-time support staff. So what happens is that they'll get 6% worth of their scheduled hours, and this is equal to, in time, 15 days of vacation for the year. So according to their schedule. So this is an extra 6% of their salary will be paid for each pay, and then the time is just entered in the time off through Workday. And this is just going on to confirm that it's employee self-serve for requesting these types of leaves for the short-term leaves. If the employee is unable to, well, of course, has to, when they enter their leaves, it will then go to the manager for approval, so that you always have that step. And if you have any questions, you could just let me know now. Unfortunately, I have a hard stop at 3. Okay, great. I'll pass it on to Courtney then.
Quiet room. Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Morrison.
Sorry.
Yep. Question.
here.
This question isn't necessarily part-time related. I'm wondering within Workday for family care leave, if there is a cap on the 6 days for full-time employees and 3 days for part-time employees. Will it tell the individual that they've already surpassed their limit?
It will. And it will only allow you to take the amount of time that you're entitled to.
Okay.
If you come across any different that works differently, then please let us know, because there can always be little quirks that we need to work out. So just let us know if you come across something that doesn't work in that manner. Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, so I'm doing a bit of a compensation refresher. I'm one of 2 compensation and pension officers at the college. So specifically going over, of course, a few changes from the part-time support staff collective agreement. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is not quite compensation related, but our disability management coordinators just wanted us to touch on a bit of a reminder as it relates to anybody who has a workplace injury or who's on leave for WSIB incidences. So it's there's no changes from the collective agreement that was implemented, but as part of the phase 3 implementation, some things were changed so that that time can actually be entered in Workday. So that's the biggest change that you'll see from phase 3. So they just wanted us to go over a little bit of a reminder and let everybody know that there is actually a policy for WSIB incidences in the workplace. So if you ever have kind of something you need to know about that process, you can check HS05. Of course, we have 2 disability management coordinators at the college, so they're there as a resource for you to answer any questions. But the policy itself just goes over the roles and responsibilities and what to do in case of an accident or incident at the college. So you would reach out to them if you have an employee that has any lost time, if you have an employee that has sought any medical attention, or if you have any employee that's requesting accommodation greater than 7 days. Again, none of this information is new or a change from the collective agreement. The change now is that we can actually track it in Workday for reporting purposes and all of those things. So I just wanted to touch on that. Does anyone have any questions about that before we talk about the compensation piece? Okay. So Ralph touched upon a little bit earlier some of the changes in the collective agreement regarding things like shift premium and overtime for part-time support staff. So the collective agreement does specify that part-time employees, which are regular part-time, temporary, and PNOK, are entitled to shift premiums, and those shift premiums are calculated in Workday. So there's a little excerpt there right from the collective agreement. But essentially, a shift premium is paid in the amount of 75 cents for any hours that these 3 categories of employees work between 5 p.m. and midnight, and then $1 for any hours they work between midnight and 6 a.m. And the amount of shift premium that they're paid is actually dictated by where the majority of their hours fall. So if more than 50% of their hours are worked in the $1 shift premium range, then the whole shift will be paid at $1. So those calculations for someone who has 1 part-time support staff position are actually done in Workday. So I've included a bit of a screenshot here where you can see that somebody has entered, sorry, it's a bit small, somebody has entered some hours from 3 p.m. till 11:30 p.m. Obviously, that shift goes into the shift premium time. So Workday will actually calculate the shift premium on the hours between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. during that 3 to 11:30 shift. So there's no need for the employee to enter anything specific. They just enter their regular time in and their regular time out, and the shift premium is calculated accordingly. You can see that there's a column at the top that says shift premium, and 6.5 hours are being entered in there. That lets them know that those eligible hours are getting the shift premium. One important thing to note, just you may have questions from employees, casual employees and students are not eligible for shift premium under the collective agreement, but the time entry setup is the same for everybody. So if a casual employee works that same 3 to 11:30 shift, they'll still see 6.5 hours in the shift premium column, but they won't actually be getting paid a premium for those hours. So they may have questions about why they see it there and why they're not getting anything extra. It's just because it's the same time entry module for everybody, but they're not entitled to it as per the collective agreement. So you can just respond in that way and refer them to the collective agreement where it's outlined that they're not entitled, but just something to note that they will see it, so you may have questions about it. Any questions about shift premium before we move on? Pretty straightforward. Oops. So the next provision is overtime. So the collective agreement did change the overtime for part-time support staff a little bit. As you may know, the Employment Standards Act dictates that overtime is paid after 44 hours, but our new collective agreement specifies that overtime is paid after 40 hours for our part-time support staff. So it's important to note here, in case you have any employees working over 40 hours, we don't think it's going to be a regular or very high occurrence, since our part-time support staff are limited to 24 hours of work per week. So on a 2-week basis, they shouldn't really be going into over 40 hours very often. But if they do, that entitlement is there for them, and it is after 40 hours of work. So the way that it will work in Workday, if a part-time support staff employee only has one position, they'll still enter their regular time in and their regular time out. And as soon as they get to the over 40-hour threshold, Workday will calculate the overtime premium automatically. So there's a screenshot on the next slide, but essentially it looks the same as the shift premium. There's an overtime column. Those hours will go into the overtime column to show them how many hours are in the premium range, and they'll get paid that. One important thing to mention is many part-time support staff have more than one role. If that's the case, and they have more than one position, and they're going into over 40 hours per week, they actually have to select any hours over 40 from a drop-down menu to note that those hours are overtime. So Workday won't automatically calculate it if they have more than one position. So they will actually have to specify once they get to like 40.5 hours, that 0.5 of those hours are overtime, and it will show as OT at 1.5%. So again, they may have questions about that, so they'll be able to see that in their time entry and as one of the options for the drop downs. The only thing that this multiplication won't apply to is if somebody is working as a part-time support staff and a faculty member, and that faculty hours cause them to go into over 40 hours. If it wasn't all support hours that caused them to go into that overtime, then we default to the ESA of 44 hours for their overtime, unless it's all hours worked as part-time support. And then again, there's just an example on the next page. So you can see the tallies at the top. The employee view, this person worked 40 hours and 5 hours of overtime. So they can see that they're getting paid for 45 hours, 40 of them are regular, 5 of them are overtime. I included the manager view in this one too. I think it's just important to note that you'll still see all of their hours entered as regular in and out. So you won't see any of those hours as overtime, but you have the same tally as the top, showing 40 hours regular, 5 hours overtime, for a total of 45. So that's your check to make sure that those hours over 40 are getting paid the overtime premium when you're approving the time that's been entered. And that's it for compensation. Is there any questions related to any of that? I'm going to let Ralph take that one.
Thanks. So, yeah, there is still a limit that you can't be scheduling employees for more than 24 hours at the college. So, in general, you can't be scheduling part-time support staff over 24 hours. There is a memorandum of settlement where there is some flexibility in the case of emergencies or backup or where all other feasible options have been exhausted. So let's say you have an increase in workload. The first thing you can look at is your workforce, see your RPTs, see your full-timers, look at your other temporary. So anyone already under 24, see if you can shuffle around individuals. As a last resort, if there's no other option, then you can put them as over 24 hours per week. Does that answer your question?
How many times?
Up to 17 weeks. Yeah, I know. So the 17-week number is still there. It's just, if you know you're going to have an increase of workload in February or in a month, that's still enough time to plan for it. So don't schedule people for over 24 hours per week unless you really have to. Any other questions on that? Yes, Doug.
If the extended work is going to be 2 or 3 weeks, would you still hire somebody to do 2 or 3 weeks of 1 or 2 days kind of thing? Is that the intent?
If you know that you're going to have, 3 weeks of work, so one option is to hire a temporary employee for 3 weeks. The other option is to shuffle around individuals in your department. If they're all maxed out, then I would say hire a temporary person. If all your RPTs are maxed out, yes. That's better than having your current RPT at 24 hours a week work 40 hours a week for 3 weeks, hire another temporary to work the 3 weeks. And I know that's where, there's a cost of training and there's a cost of onboarding. But in terms of just abiding with the collective agreement, it just says under Article 9.3, I believe, where part-timers should only work up to 24 hours per week, just abiding by that specific provision. Okay. I'm good. Get back to you. Oh, there's, okay.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just the last slide is about the summary of changes. In Workday right now, there are 5 distinct employee types. When you hire an employee, you can put them as RPT, temporary, casual, PNRK, or student. That's different than before. The other change is that now they're entitled to breaks in a different format. Previously, it was that they're entitled to a half an hour of unpaid break at 5 hours. Now it's after 5 hours. And the last change is that employees can enter their own time off. And this is our mission again, just in case anyone forgot. And the questions period. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Thank you. For part-time, they've never entered time off before. Are they just entering time off for things that they get paid, like bereavement and that, or is it any time they want time off? Because normally they just enter time worked, right?
Great. So any time for time off, and this is for part-time, so do they enter, refresh me if they enter their time, or regular part-time, it's just always set, so there's no time entries needed. So that, if you enter your time, then you would enter your time, but choose the reason code related to the reason why you're off, such as sick or vacation. Does that answer the question? Sorry, do you want to, I'll just have you just repeat it.
Perhaps we've been doing it wrong, but our part-time staff, support staff, never enter time off. They only enter time worked. So is this new where now if they're going to be off, they have to enter that?
If it's one of the reasons, so part of that is to track why the reason why they're off. So if they're supposed to be working, and I'm sure you'll jump in, if they're supposed to be working but they're not working for one of the leave reasons on the list, then they would enter the time as that, and then it's recorded as that, and then it will be either paid or unpaid. So we're also entering what unpaid leaves are so that we can track them. And there's also sometimes maximum number of days that you can take for those types of leaves and for those types of leave reasons. But Ruben, did you have something to add to that?
So there's a difference on time off and leave. So leave refers to any type of leave that, for example, maternity leave, parental leave, sick leave longer than 5 days. Those type of leaves are being done still through human resources. Time off basically is if, for example, there's sick one day, or they have citizenship duty or jury duty. Those types of leaves already are embedded within the employee group that they have. So if they're casual, basically there will be a listing of time off that they're entitled to. If they're RPT, obviously there's a list of time off that they can choose. So to answer your question, yes, any time off that they get, they're encouraged to go and enter it and see the list that they have available. It should be tied to the employee group that they are.
I'll just add to that, the reason that some of the changes were made for that time off entry, even those unpaid ones, like let's say a part-time support staff is taking some of their vacation days, we know it's unpaid, but we want to be able in the future to report on that, to track on that, to make sure they're not going over that. And we didn't really have the ability to do that before, so it is something that they have to do, but that's kind of the reasoning behind why we chose to do that, just for reporting and tracking purposes.
Any other questions? Michelle, you had a question? No? Okay. Can't fix that, sorry. Any other questions? Okay, so we're done early. You get, I think, an hour and a half back or something of the sort, so thank you. You'll be receiving an email with the PowerPoint with a recording again and FAQs as well as a survey, and you can comment on the reverb effect on the survey. So, thank you.